Hi, I'm Teresa from Phoenix Gate Crafts, and this video is actually continuation on employment part 1. I originally filmed this section along with the video that I posted last week. And when I was editing, I realized that, well, for one, I had like an hour and 6 minutes of footage that I had to cut down, and it was late and I was tired and I didn't want to do that. So I decided to split this up. So instead of having 2 parts on employment, I'm going to have 3 parts on employment. This video is part 2 out of 3, and it is on how not to be a shitty boss. Because something that's come up in recent years since I gave up my business is I realized I don't want to find another job working under somebody because I have had very bad and traumatizing experiences with bad bosses. About a third of my bosses have been absolute shit. About a third of my bosses have been great, and about a third of my bosses have been pretty meh. And when you're dealing with work that is not always like the fulfillment of your dreams, the boss situation can make or break the working experience. And I've noticed that people, myself included, are willing to put up with the crappiest of jobs if their boss makes it worthwhile. So this video has a little bit of a structure to it. I'm going to tell you what not to do, and then I'm going to tell you what to do instead. And most of these are going to have an example thrown in from my real life. So I hope you find this entertaining, but most importantly, I hope you find this useful in figuring out your own balance and your own management and bossing style. And I hope that ultimately what you do reduces the amount of turnover you get, because turnover is how often people quit and you need to rehire for a position. Lower turnover means fewer people quit in a period of time, usually a year, and you don't have to rehire them, because one of the most expensive things you will ever have to do is hiring and training new employees. So keeping somebody who is good is one of the make it or break it things when your business is growing. And now for the big important part of this video: how not to be a shit boss, because a good pay will attract good employees, but they won't stay unless they feel validated and that that working for you is worth their time. There have been 2 basic things that have really changed the employment industry since COVID, and I've been on both sides, the employees and the employer side of this, and I really have to side with the employees on this one. But for so long, a lot of minimum wage jobs have really taken advantage of those low-cost employees, treating them like dirt, asking them to go above and beyond for little to no extra pay, and basically having them work in horrible conditions where they are treated so disrespectfully. When I worked for InCoffee for 6 years as a barista, working on register and as a barista, and I can tell you at least once a shift, I got yelled at for something that wasn't my fault. And if I had good managers, they would step in, take the brunt of it for me. But if I had crappy management, not only did I get yelled at by the employee, I often got yelled at again by my manager. And it just creates this hostile working environment that the employee, they're not going to stay in. And since COVID, when we found out who really were essential employees, people aren't taking the abuse anymore. And as a manager, it is your job to foster an environment where nobody gets abused, where everybody feels safe to work, not just physically, but emotionally. And it's not your job to be like their therapist if they're having problems in their everyday lives, but definitely keeping that boundary where your bad mood does not reflect on how you treat your staff. So basically, people aren't working past what they've agreed to work. So if they are going to say work for you for 6 hours, and you need them suddenly to work 8 hours, don't be surprised if they can't stay that extra 2 hours because they weren't planning on it. They have other stuff they need to do. They might have another job they're getting to. They might have to pick up their kids from school. Not everybody can just drop everything in their personal lives to work for you. Allowing them a work-life balance will treat them very well. And if they are working on contract, something that happens with contract employees is working to the job, not working 2 hours. And here's the thing, unless that's stipulated in their contract that they work to the job, not working for hours, they don't have to. They do not have to step anywhere outside of their contract. So making sure that you are not asking beyond their contract means nobody is going to quiet quit on you. Because the other term for quiet quitting is working to contract or working to agreement. You cannot ask extra from them if you are not willing to give extra to them. Employment is a mutually beneficial situation, and you need to make sure to hold up your end to make it mutually beneficial. So, how to avoid being a shit boss? Number 1, you cannot avoid being a shit boss if you do not have an employee that is well paired to you. I worked as an assistant to a realtor for a while. She was very domineering and very controlling, and I would mess up and she would think that I had intentionally messed up her system. It took me 6 months to understand real estate because she couldn't effing explain it to me in a way that I could understand it. I am a procedural learner. She is a global thinker. That just left us butting heads a lot. And it wasn't until I quit that she stopped being in competition with me that we could actually get some work done. I gave her 3 months notice, so I basically finished out the working year, and then she managed to hire somebody else to do that job, who I assume did it better for her, but we were just butting heads the whole time. It was miserable for both of us, and I was so much happier when I left, and she was so much happier when I left. There is nothing you can do if the employee is just not a good fit. And they could be a bad fit for you. They could be a bad fit for the work. I am not a very good follower. I've always been a natural leader. And in positions where I have a lot of autonomy, I do very well. But whenever I have to say, yes, ma'am, like I would be horrible in the military. They need soldiers to be able to be yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And I can't do it because if you give me a stupid order, I am not following it. I'd wash out real fast. But I did really well as a tutor because I could manage my own schedule. I got to choose what I would do with my students. And as a result, I flourish as a tutor, even when I'm working underneath somebody else. My recommendation is when you realize it's not working, get rid of them or let them leave on their own and focus on somebody new. Rule number 2, never accuse your employees of anything. So this really rolls into like the next one. Things get really complicated if you're accusing your employees of anything, especially if they didn't do what you're accusing them of. So, for example, if they are helping you at a market and you notice that the till is $20 short. You don't say, did you steal $20? That's rude. And chances are very good they didn't steal the $20. It's possible they did, not very likely. But saying, the till is $20 short. Do you know what happened? You and they might realize, I didn't put the $20 in the right spot. hold on, I put it over here, and you'll find that it's in like a little side pocket of the fanny pack instead of being where it should have been. So by asking, you set them up to create a solution for you. Number 3, don't trap your employees. Because if you're asking questions, you can unintentionally ask questions in a way that there is a right answer and a wrong answer. And it becomes a test. And this puts them on the defensive. This is what happened to me when I worked at Barnes & Noble in the cafe. The regional cafe manager came by, and apparently I had been making Americanos the wrong way. They wanted me to do the water first, then add the espresso shots, and then top off with any water that I need. The way I had learned how to make them originally at Java City was you put the shots in first, then fill with water. And this is something that is not agreed upon in the industry. Different people have different perspectives on it. And my training at Barnes & Noble was absolute shit. They never actually told me how they wanted me to do it. So I did it the way I had learned. And when they noticed that I wasn't making it correctly, I got asked, how do you make an Americano? I told them, I don't know. This is how I've always done it. And then I got scolded. And I got this lecture about how billions of dollars were spent to decide that this is the way that more people like their Americanos, which is bullshit because Barnes & Noble didn't do any research. Barnes & Noble was using Starbucks recipes. Chances are very good that Starbucks did that research, but that whole situation left me, 1, very defensive, and 2, I'm still pissed about it, and it happened in 2015. And I'm recording this in 2024. It has been 9 years and I'm still pissed. So, anyway, the way they should have handled that was just noticing the issue. Hey, I noticed that you put the shots first in the Americano. Then reasoning why that's wrong. We have an agreement with Starbucks that we make their recipes according to their policy. Their policy is to do water first, then shots, and then top off with water. And then the solution. Would you please make it the way that Starbucks wants you to make it? This has 1, no judgment, and 2, this is problem solution. I don't mind making the change. I may not like it. I might not agree that that is the best way to make an Americano, but I understand the reasoning. And it makes sense, and I'll do it. I do find that people who understand why something is done are much more likely to do it the way you want them to because it makes sense. And 4, keep criticism constructive. That example I just gave in number 3, problem, solution, works every time. It keeps the emotions out of it. Keeping harshness and values out of it. Yeah, you messed up. Everybody messes up. But figuring out why this thing is going wrong and how to do it correctly prepares them for next time. And it doesn't make the employee feel nearly as bad. And when you do catch something that they did wrong, make sure that they know that you did recognize something they did right. An example of this that went wrong. Again, at Barnes & Noble, I have no problem bad-mouthing the particular location of Barnes & Noble that I worked at. I was working by myself in the cafe. Did you know that a Barnes & Noble cafe is set up to have 4 employees? Yes, somebody taking orders, somebody ringing things up, somebody making the drinks, and somebody who is doing all the kind of back work. So like making sure the pastry case is fully stocked, restocking the espresso bar, cleaning tables and the milk area, doing dishes, that kind of stuff. Making sure everything has everything it needs in order to run smoothly and be clean. It'll probably also surprise you to know that we often worked by ourselves or with one other person. So that way, breaks would be covered. So basically, one person is doing the job of 4 people. Already there's an imbalance here. I was working one day by myself, and then the second person came on so that I could take my break. And one of the assistant managers came in, started inspecting everything, which, by the way, looked really good. I did a good job and found the one thing I forgot to clean. And here's what he did. He picked up a rag out of the bucket that's supposed to be used to clean the counters. We are not supposed to use that bucket on dishes. That is against health code. And he started wiping off this tool incorrectly and bitching about how I did it wrong while he was doing it wrong. I got pissed, and instead of running my mouth, I did what I thought was the sensible thing and walked away to help a customer. And he called me into the back room and gave me a tongue lashing. We got into a loud argument. I was not surprised a few months later when I got pushed out. None of that was handled properly. You know the proper way to have done that? Looked around, said, wow, you have this very clean. Picked up the tool that was dirty. It was a pizza cutter, by the way. And say, oh, this is dirty though. And I said, oops, sorry, I missed it, grabbed it, and would have taken it and washed it right then. Problem solved, right? Problem solution. Not making a big deal of a minor mistake. Instead, he made it into a big thing, and I made it worse. Now, a really good example of this is something that happened about a year or two earlier when I was a supervisor at Java City. The library location had huge windows, like floor to ceiling on 2 walls. And regularly they needed to get cleaned just because otherwise you can't see through them. They look all foggy. So somebody has to do it, and I had one of our new employees do it. The first time she did it, she took like 2 hours. She did a beautiful job, but it took 2 hours. We can't afford to have somebody doing a BS job for that long. So I had to correct that. So what I did was I took her aside and said, hey, can I talk to you for a second? And remember real quick, most people with our parents and with our employers are conditioned when we're told, hey, can I talk to you for a sec? We're prepared for a dressing down and to get into trouble. So I always clarify, don't worry, you're not in trouble because of this. And I said, so I noticed that you did the windows. You did a beautiful job, by the way. So I noticed she did a really good job. They were perfect. However, it did take you 2 hours to do this. That's the criticism. And now we get into the constructive part of the criticism. However, that's a little bit too slow. So next time, when you do it again, can you try to do it within 45 minutes? I understand you won't be able to do as good of a job, but if you could get it done within 45 minutes, I would greatly appreciate it. Just so that way you're available for other tasks that we need you for. And she said, okay. And you know what? The most important thing with this is to follow up next time. So the next time she did it, she got it done in half an hour. So I noted it. When she came back from doing it, I said, wow, you did a great job. And you did it only in 30 minutes. Awesome. Thank you so much. Make sure to thank them. It matters. Number 6. This is related to number 5, but no compliment sandwiches. They're patronizing as fuck. And they know what you're doing. You're trying to make something bad sound like something good. A compliment sandwich is a compliment, a criticism, and then a compliment. And here's the thing with those. We don't actually name sandwiches based on the bread. It's like, we're not calling them pumpernickel sandwiches. We're calling them ham and Swiss sandwiches, right? We call them based on what's in the middle of the sandwich. So a compliment sandwich is actually a shit sandwich because there's shit in the middle. And they're fake. They always come across as fake. Even if the compliment at the beginning and the compliment at the end are real, we know you really are trying to give us bad news and you're not handling the bad news appropriately. So, problem, solution, takes away the emotions. Employees do not need unnecessary flattery. And that brings us to number 7, be honest. The biggest thing you can do for your employees is be honest. Don't let them do something that you don't think is going to work. Have that discussion. Tell them what the problem is. Tell them why that's something you don't want to do. Transparency with your employees, as well as your customers, makes for a better, well-rounded experience. My very first job, I worked in a live theater box office at my junior college. My boss said something that basically informed how I've always handled customers and later how I handled my employees. Our job in customer service is not to tell people what they can't do. Our job is to tell them what they can do and the reasons why so they can make the best decisions for themselves. That's all our job is as managers and business owners. We tell people the rules so that they can make the best decisions for themselves. So like one policy I have, and we'll talk about this in a future video, is don't give away the store. Don't just appease angry customers. I know that this underling is dealing with this pissed off customer. They want to just give them that extra bar of soap or that extra candle or whatever and just be done with it and get them away from them because they're yelling at them. One, realize that the customer is being abusive and that is not okay. And number two, make sure your employee knows that they cannot give away the store because you need to make money off of your products. And because a customer who's flipping out is really trying to take advantage of that poor employee and get extra stuff. And that is not behavior you want to encourage. So making sure the employee knows that and knows that if they get a customer like that, send them to me. Because as a manager and as the employer, the buck stops with you. And you can make the decision as to whether to acquiesce or hold your ground regarding policy. And we'll talk about that when we get to the customer service side, but realizing that that employee, knowing those rules, has a course of action because they know the transparency and what the policy is. It's just like little kids having boundaries feel a lot safer. Employees knowing the boundaries and knowing the reasons for the boundaries also feel a lot safer in their work. They feel less like they're going to accidentally step on a landmine and get themselves fired. Remember, as an employer, you're the one with the power because you control their paychecks. And that brings us to number 8, always be reliable. You set a schedule, stick to the schedule. You want them to do this thing, and this thing? Have them do this thing, and this thing. It is very frustrating for employees to go in, get told that they have to make this number of candles. It's very important to do it by the end of the workday. And then get sidelined with a whole bunch of BS work while the thing that they were told was a priority is suddenly sidelined. It doesn't make sense. Or to be told that they're supposed to do this work, only to come in and find out that you did it. So now instead of having 8 hours of work, they're going to only be there for 4 hours. This really cuts into their paycheck. Also, with regards to payroll and paychecks, always make sure to pay your staff on time. Many people, especially in today's economy, most people are living paycheck to paycheck. It is not your job to cast judgments on how they spend their money, and it's none of your business anyway. They need that paycheck when they expect that paycheck. They will not only be upset, if you don't pay them, there could be legal consequences. If there is one thing you always pay, it's your employees. And pay them on time. If there is a snafu and their payment is going to be late, that actually happened a few times to me when I owned my tutoring company because my payroll company did not work on Saturdays or Sundays. So I actually had to create a policy that I explained to people when I hired them that, you get paid on the 15th. But if the 15th lands on a Saturday, you will get paid on the Friday before, which will be the 14th. If the 15th lands on a Sunday, you will get paid the next day, Monday, which will be the 16th. So that way they understand how that all works. And occasionally, sometimes there was an issue with the payroll company or a withdrawal or a payment or something. And once I found out about that, letting the employee or employees know that that was happening and when to expect it once I knew, they were less likely to freak out when they didn't see the money drop into their account. That wasn't by any means a good thing, but it wasn't as bad as them finding out 3 days later, I didn't get paid and now I have to pay my rent. Now, I think number 9 kind of goes without saying, but never yell at an employee. I understand that something didn't go right. It can cost you a lot of money. Like if your employee accidentally left the spigot for a giant melting pot full of wax open and it all spilled along the floor that is dirty and it dried. Now, not only are you out that 45-pound block of wax, you also have to pay them to clean it up or clean it up yourself, which is just extra work. It gets expensive. I have, as an employee, accidentally cost my employer a client. And with tutoring, since they can take hundreds of dollars every month, that's a lot of unearned income. Even if you're upset, take a moment. Breathe. Get yourself off of those feelings you're feeling and get yourself onto a plan of what needs to happen. My natural response is, well, that's not good. That's a good, safe one. That's not good. It's acknowledging something bad happened. Then I take a breath and say, okay, what's the next step? And that way I'm not yelling at them because oftentimes what happened was not intentional. Just like a little kid who drew on the wall didn't realize that wasn't something they were supposed to do. Yelling at them doesn't help. Mistakes happen. Whoops. What do we have to do? Okay, well, let's get some paper towels and sop up what we can, and then whatever we can't, I've got a putty knife. Enjoy. They get to scrape with that 1.5-inch wide putty knife because that's what you got. But don't yell at your employee. Yelling is abuse. All it does is it tears them down and it makes them feel awful. And you'll notice that if you yell at your employees and disparage them and make negative comments at them all the time, they're not going to stay with you for very long. Number 10, remember, because you have their paycheck, you have the power in your relationship. This means you need to be careful not to take advantage of it. Most people have been trained to automatically say yes to employers because they need this job and they want to keep it. This has allowed a lot of employers to abuse their employees, ask more out of the employees than they really should be getting. That isn't ethical. That isn't right. This is why a lot of people are quiet quitting. And what a lot of this boils down to is number 11. Be respectful. Your employee is a person who is working with you. You're the employer. They are technically working for you, but they are doing something that for one reason or another you can't or won't do for yourself. They are helping you. They are doing something you need them to do. And as a result, they are actually working with you to a common goal. And that deserves respect. So treat them like a person. You don't have to treat them like a friend. You don't have to treat them like family. But definitely treat them as a person in their own right, with their own hopes and dreams and responsibilities outside of work, and treat them the way you would want to be treated in that situation. A lot of bosses get wrapped up in what they need and forget that it's about what everybody needs. And as long as you treat the people with respect, they will most likely treat you with respect in return. It's a very reciprocal, synergistic thing. And all of this boils down to number 12. The same point I made at the beginning. High pay draws high quality employees, but how you treat them and how you handle them will determine whether or not they stay with you. A lot of people will take lower pay and higher respect over a job that pays well and makes them feel like garbage. So don't ever make your employees feel like garbage. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful. We'll talk about actually hiring and firing employees next time. Happy crafting. Bye.